Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I hope most of you had time to listen to the last one. When I just sent a recording, it was mantra 7. I didn't finish mantra 7, but it was kind of somewhere in the middle. So we'll continue from there. Any points or questions from the last class that maybe came up? Okay, then we'll read the verse again and then we can. Okay. Yasmin sarvani bhutani atmaiva buddhijanataha tatra ko moha shoka ekatva manupashyata. Charanarina, could you read the translation?
One who always sees all living entities as spiritual sparks and quality one with the Lord becomes a true knower of things. What then can be illusion or anxiety for him?
Thank you. So I just quickly go through the purport overview. So qualitative oneness, quantitative difference. We'll speak a little bit more about that. Seeing oneness, following the scriptures. This is ekatvam anupashyata. Following the scriptures is anupashyata, seeing like that, and ekatvam means oneness. Real enjoyment is with the Lord in the center. Illusion is moha or self-centered enjoyment, and it creates a godless civilization and anxiety. Serving the Lord's interest with the results of our activities, that's the opposite of this godless civilization, and then everyone is pleased. And then by realizing the Lord and all living entities as eternal, full of bliss and knowledge, Satchit Ananda, then one can transcend material existence, this moha, illusion, and anxiety, shoka. Okay, so we'll speak a little bit more about this ekatvam, or oneness. If right now I ask you what is ekatvam and what's... Okay, let's just first... What is ekatvam and what's the proper understanding of ekatvam?
I have oneness in quality and difference in quantity.
Very good, very good.
And it combines detachment and humility.
Very good. I'm really glad you remember that. It's a really nice point. Any other understanding of this ekatvam? So Prabhupada speaks about two, but you could even take three different meanings in this purport. Sita Vallabhi, you got something or? No.
Sorry, Mataji, no.
Okay. Okay, so we have oneness in quality. So that kind of ekatvam, Narada mentioned. Another one that Prabhupada mentions is oneness of interest. So remember, in the family, we have different family members. A father may have many sons, and the interest of the family is one, but the individuals are different, and then they work together to serve the interest of the whole family or the interest of the father. And then Prabhupada says that creates a very happy situation. And it's really interesting. I mentioned this before, but I find this quite amazing, that this is a book that doesn't really go into any Krishna pastimes, Krishna Lila, Krishna qualities, because it's for Gyanis to come to a more personal understanding. But then in this purport, Prabhupada speaks about the family of the Supreme Being. So it doesn't say Krishna's family or anything like a really personal name, just the Supreme Being, or the son of the Supreme Being. And then there is even a family of the Parabrahman, which I find Absolutely amazing, yeah. The absolute family of the Parabrahman. So usually we think of Brahman as something very impersonal, just a light or effulgence, but here we talk about the family of the Parabrahman, and of course we know that the Parabrahman is Krishna. Yeah, so it's a very interesting, the very personal understanding that Srila Prabhupada has shines through even these a little bit more covered mantras or purports. Okay, so we had two understandings so far, oneness of quality and oneness of interest. And then the third understanding is not merging kind of oneness when meeting, like a river meets the ocean. And all the aquatics or the fishes in the river, they don't become one, but they meet the ocean. There is a really nice explanation that Chaitanya Charan Prabhu gives for this meeting, not merging. So this is from Kunti Devi's prayers. O Lord of Madhu, as the Ganges forever flows to the sea without hindrance, let my attraction be constantly drawn unto you without being diverted to anyone else. So this is how the devotee meets the Lord. Let my attraction flow to you without any hindrance, without any obstacle. And the way Chaitanya Charan Prabhu says, no obstacle can hold the devotee back. Nothing holds the devotee back, and the devotee holds nothing back. So the devotee gives his full heart, her full heart, and nothing can hold him back. So even if you can't serve physically, you can serve in the mind. I have a good friend who had a very serious car accident. She broke her neck and she was immobilized at least for a month or two in a hospital. She's completely recovered now. But at the time she was in hospital, she couldn't move at all. She was just lying in a hospital bed. And her spiritual master told her, okay, so now you can't do anything physically. In your mind, you can cook offerings to Radha Shyama and make the offering. So even if physically you can't do something, you can't do a service, then in your mind, you can do it. And pujaris do that anyway. Before doing puja in the morning, then you're supposed to do manasa puja in your mind, offering the best of everything. So you might not be able to offer a 56 item feast when you do puja, but might just offer a cut apple or a few different fruits. But in your mind, before you start the puja, in your manasa puja, you can offer everything, and a beautiful ghee lamp with 100 ghee wicks, beautiful outfits, bring water from the Ganges. So in your mind, in your manasa puja, you can offer much more opulent worship. Okay, so this is like one aspect. Nothing holds the devotee back. The attraction, the attention of the devotee flows towards the Lord without any hindrance. And then we also have these other verses from Bhagavad Gita. Engage your mind in always thinking of me, become my devotee, offer your obeisances to me. So giving the whole heart, whole body, whole mind, whole intelligence, using everything in Krishna's service. So this kind of absorption in Krishna also creates a kind of oneness, ekatvam. It's not impersonal oneness that the Mayavadis speak about, but it's oneness, complete oneness in the sense of complete absorption in Krishna. Okay. And then another understanding of this oneness is, I don't know if you ever had this experience of being in a really dark room and then suddenly coming out into the light. And then the light can be so bright that first you don't see you can't see all the objects, you just see the bright shining. I read once a book about some Jewish people who were hiding in the sewers in Warsaw or Krakow or some Polish town during the Holocaust, during the Second World War. So they were hiding in this dark place for maybe a year and a half, 2 years. They never saw any sunlight. And when the war ended and they came out, They said for weeks they just saw everything orange. They couldn't quite see properly because their eyes were so kind of used to the darkness. So when they came out, the light was very bright and blinding. So that's the idea. So coming out from the darkness first, before we see the form of the Lord, we just see this kind of light or shining brightness. And later on we'll see a verse in Isopanisad when the devotee asks the Lord, please remove your effulgence so I can see your form of bliss. Okay, you got a question about yoga. Do you want to explain that question?
Because even yoga is like in unison with the Lord. Would that also be explained that way, Mataji?
You could say that yoga means connection to the Lord. So
Okay.
that could be considered, so that kind of connection. The important thing that we should understand that this oneness doesn't mean becoming one with the Lord or becoming Krishna. Okay, there are so many different ways to understand it, which is still in line with Vaishnava conclusions. So yoga,
Okay.
that as well. Any other points or questions? Okay. And then the last point about this, or regarding this purport, is Prabhupada explains how material vision creates problems, it's illusion, that the jiva is an independent enjoyer, controller, proprietor. It creates bondage, and it also creates shoka or anxiety. Because we're trying to be something we are not, it creates a lot of anxiety. I don't know if you have this experience. When you try to pretend to be someone you are not, it creates a lot of anxiety. You may be trying to pretend that you are better than you are, or you are more qualified. You may be told a little lie on your CV, and now they're asking you to do that. So that creates a lot of anxiety. So this is a little thing, but the big thing is when the jiva is pretending to be the controller and enjoyer, that creates a lot of anxiety, a lot of shoka. So that's why if we follow the Ishavasya principle, who remembers what's the Ishavasya principle?
Krishna, the Lord is the owner, and he's the proprietor, and he's the controller.
Very good. Yeah. So if we follow this principle, then that kind of does away with the anxiety, because then we don't feel we need to try to control the material world and enjoy it and get anxious when things don't go our way, because why should it? We should just try to follow Krishna's plan. Okay. Chaitanya Charan Prabhu gave a very detailed analysis of what's the result of different ways of seeing the material world. So I show you this. So if there is a material object and we have a material vision, that creates bondage. So an example is, I wanted to give some fairly innocent examples. So attraction to Mozart's Symphony number 14 G minor, but it can be anything. It's just, gulab jamuns or whatever else. Okay, so it's just basically you have a material object, you see it materially, you're trying to enjoy it. That creates bondage. The next level is when it is a material object, but your vision is spiritual. That creates purification. So this basically means using material things in Krishna's service. So we have here a flatback truck for Ratha Yatra. So the truck is material, but because you use it for Krishna's service, it creates purification, not just for you, but for the person who built the truck, who's building the truck, who's gave you the petrol for the truck, and anything else, the flowers that you offer to your deities, person who grew the flowers, they get some benefit as well, and the person who sold the flowers. So if you use a material object for a spiritual purpose, because you have a spiritual vision, it creates purification. If there is a spiritual object, but you see it materially, your vision is material, that creates offense and also missing out on spiritual advancement. A very good example is seeing deity worship as idol worship, idolatry. Okay, so you have the deity, Krishna, God, but some people have this very strong hostility towards deity worship, misunderstanding some points from the Bible, and they sometimes even want to break the deity, or even if they don't break it, they're very inimical. But that creates offense, because if Krishna, or even if God is omnipotent, why could he not appear in a deity? Then you're kind of restricting him, limiting him by saying he's omnipotent, he's most powerful, he's omnipresent, he's present everywhere except in the deity. So it doesn't really make that much sense. So seeing spiritual objects with material vision creates offense. And then if the object is spiritual and our vision is spiritual, then it's the same as the second one. It creates purification initially and then ecstasy. So seeing the deity as Krishna, then we become purified and then we go back to Krishna. So it's not just what it is, but what's much more important is how we see it, what our vision is. Okay, applying this in practice, we need to be somewhat introspective, because the principle is that we should use everything in Krishna's service. At the same time, we have to ask ourselves, am I the right person for using this in Krishna's service? Am I able to use this in Krishna's service? Am I able to engage this person or use this thing in Krishna's service? An example may be a lot of brahmacharis find it quite difficult to preach to young ladies, and especially sometimes devotees do preaching on the beach. There's lots of people there, they got nothing to do, so it's a good place to preach. But if brahmacharis spend too much time seeing very scantily clad ladies, maybe they're not the best people to engage them. So we need to be somewhat introspective and thoughtful about it. So we need to be honest about it. Am I using this object? Am I engaging this person in Krishna's service? Or is Maya using me? Or is this thing using me in Maya's service? Okay, so this is an individual thing. Just be honest with yourselves. Okay. Another point relating to this is that we shouldn't whitewash everything as spiritual. So when somebody is an Uttamadhikari, highest level devotee, they only see everything as spiritual. They see every living entity as Krishna's servant. But if we are not on that level, we shouldn't artificially pretend to be there. Okay, so don't whitewash everything. We should see the spiritual potential, but we should also understand, okay, I'm not necessarily on the level to deal with this thing or this person on a spiritual level. We also need to kind of be considerate of people's cultural backgrounds. People have different natures, individualities, and deal with them accordingly. Not just say, well, everyone is a jiva, everybody is spiritual, so I can just deal with everybody in the exact same way. When Prabhupada first arrived in America, he wrote this prayer, let my message be understandable to, or let your message, saying to Krishna, let your message be understandable to them, meaning give me the empowerment, give me the ability so I can convey your message to them in a way that's understandable. Okay. Is this okay? Any points or questions? Okay. Narada?
Yeah, and I just want to say that Mozart's compositions are quite godly. I don't like the example.
Yeah, change the example.
And
I'm
I think
not really a music expert, so it just sounded really, what's the word for it? Sophisticated.
okay.
But I change it. It's not. It doesn't really matter. It can be a gulab jamun, although you can offer that to Krishna. You can offer most things to Krishna. Yes, but the point is that it's like mundane music. That's the point. But thank you for that. Okay, I have a question relating to this verse. I think I asked it last week as well, and I asked you to think about it. So, how can we practically apply this verse in our lives? Any practical applications? Charanarenu?
I was just thinking at work, one of my colleagues, I struggle with a bit because they're very lazy. They don't like to actually work. So I can get quite frustrated and a little bit annoyed and think of her in not such a nice way. But if I see that actually, underneath that, obviously, she's part and parcel of Krishna. She's very dear to Krishna. And actually, she's just being controlled by the modes of nature. Then it helps me with my frustration.
That's a really good example. Thank you very much. It's a really good example, and I think something that helps a lot for most of us. Thank you. Any other realizations, thoughts, insights? Narada?
Yeah, maybe along similar lines, like when we have maybe like a problem, let's say with someone that maybe, I don't know, insult us or treat us bad, or what's it, something that it's not either enjoyable or nice for us, or, maybe they create problems for us and so on. So it's nice to think that Krishna is kindly, helping us advance either by burning karma or by learning from the lesson or by having to, there is a reason why we got in there, and whether it's our own entanglement, but Krishna has kindly generated a situation for us to move up. I don't know if I make it clear.
And a really important point here is that to see Krishna's hand in it, rather than just kind of go into a blame game, just thinking of whose fault it is that I'm suffering. Just say, okay, this may be my karma, but what's even more important, let me see this is Krishna's hand. If I learn from it, if I deal with it in a proper way, then this will actually take me closer to him. Thank you. Sita Vallabhi and then Shyamala Kumari.
Hare Krishna Mataji. So I have a question actually. Basically I'm trying to see all living entities as part of Krishna. So for example, in my front garden, like in the driveway, we get a lot of ants during summer, and they tend to go inside, and my husband wants to put the ant powder, and we always have an argument about this because I feel we cannot do that. And then he tells me, but this house belongs to Radharani and you have to protect it because you can't let them just come in and live the way they want to. So I have this issue where I feel that it's not nice to do that because they're all Krishna, part and parcel of Krishna. But at the same time, like I've seen at the temples as well, that they have to protect the temple from rodents and other living entities to enter, because that's just going to cause havoc later. So it's just really sad to.
This is a really, really good question. This is something I struggled a lot when I was in Scotland, because there's so many slugs there trying to grow things, and the slugs eat them all up. So the principle is to cause the minimum amount of harm and violence. One time devotees asked Prabhupada about, like you say, rodents, rats and mice. And Prabhupada said, if you just keep everything really, really clean, then you won't have problem with that. But then some things, it's not enough to just keep everything clean. Sometimes you need to be a little bit more, what's the word for it, forceful.
Yeah.
But just use the least amount of violence. So my struggle with the slugs, I researched and researched until I found some ways to repel them rather than put down poison to kill them. There are certain things they don't like and repel them.
Yeah.
Or yeah, so
Okay.
that's the idea. But it's right, you don't want to kind of harm them. They're also spirit souls, but at the same time, like your husband says, it's Radharani's house, so the ants have their place outside. Radharani has her place inside, so everybody should stay where they're supposed to be.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you.
Shyamala Kumari?
Hare Krishna. On a practical level, I would say hearing about Krishna and Krishna pastimes and glories, because the more we hear about Krishna, the more we become purified. And then the more purified we are, the more we can see everybody on that equal platform, and we can see everything as part and parcel of Krishna and emanations of Krishna. Yeah, but also changing of vision, like Charanarinus mentioned and Narada Rishi, is how you see the situation. So, yeah.
Yeah, so this is a very good point. So both we need to make our conscious effort, like Chanarenu said, just see that person as Jiva who's affected by the moods. But what's also really important to purify a heart by hearing about Krishna, Krishna's pastimes, because then this vision will come more and more naturally. Prabhupada says here in the purport, the Mahabhagavata sees everyone, everything as Krishna's energy. So for them, it's a natural vision. They don't have to make a separate effort for that. Okay, so these were really, really nice points about practical application. And this is something we should try to do with all the verses we read and all the purports we read. Just slow down, pause, and think about, how does this apply to me? How does this apply to my life? There must be a reason why Krishna spoke these verses. There must be a reason why Prabhupada made all this effort to write a purport. It's not just philosophy, something to kind of have an intellectual understanding of. It's something very, very practical for my life, very relevant for my life. So we can do this with any verse or any purport. Okay. So the next verse starts the next. In fact, it doesn't start the next section yet. It will be a mantra 9, but it's quite a difficult tune. I'll try to read it. Saparyagat chukramakayam avranam asnaviram shutham apapavitham kavir manishi paribit svayambur yata tatyaturitam didadat chashvatibhya samabhya. Chiloka Chaitanya Lila Mataji?
Hare Krishna. Such a person must factually know the greatest of all, the personality of Godhead, who is unembodied, omniscient, beyond reproach, without veins, pure and uncontaminated, the self-sufficient philosopher who has been fulfilling everyone's desire since time immemorial.
Thank you. So this verse describes how this person that was described in the previous verse, how he sees the Supreme Lord. Previous verses described how he sees the material world, other living entities. Now how he sees the Supreme Lord. So we're aspiring for this knowledge. And then the next section, next 3 verses will describe how we get this knowledge, or the kind of knowledge that we need for this. The purport, Prabhupada basically analyzes all the different aspects or all the different qualities that this verse describes the Lord as. So unembodied, omnipotent. Prabhupada again speaks about deity worship. Oh, something I didn't have time last week, but I wanted to mention to you is this really nice book, which there's two books actually. Maybe some of you know it. They're both about Lord Jagannath. So the brown is called The Leelas of Lord Jagannath, and how Jagannath kind of appeared in people's lives and made difference in people's life. Some of it a bit older pastimes, a few hundred years ago. Some of them are more recent. And then this one, Lord Jagannath in Rajapur. This is very near to the Mayapur temple. And these are really recent. So these Jagannath deities are very active. So in this book, you can read pastimes that happened like 5 years ago or 3-4 years ago. Maybe not 3-4, but like I opened one just like 2006. Some pastimes, with Jaipataka Maharaj, all sorts of really, really nice pastimes. So if you need any more proof that the deity is Krishna himself, really nice books to read. Also, you can read them at night and hopefully dream about Lord Jagannath. Okay, so Prabhupada here speaks also about the deity is non-different from the Lord, expanded form of the Lord for easy access and reciprocation. How the Lord is appreciated in proportion to surrender, meaning the Lord reveals himself to the extent we surrender to him. He maintains all, awards enjoyment according to qualification. He awards hell or Vaikuntha according to our desire. Not that people desire hell, but they desire things that takes them to hell. He's the greatest, he's self-sufficient, and he's antiseptic and prophylactic. Antiseptic and prophylactic means pure and purifying. So these are the points in the purport. Okay, so the first one, Prabhupada explains this akayam, which means unembodied. So disembodied would mean that he had a body but he lost it. But unembodied means that it doesn't have a material body. This word kayam has certain connotations as a body that's separate from the person, separate from the soul, needs to be given up in time. But Krishna is kayam, so he doesn't have this kind of body. And to kind of emphasize it even more, he says asna viram, without veins. So Prabhupada says that he doesn't need a body with a mechanical construction like we have with the joints and the bones and the veins and the lymphatic system, whatever. So he's without veins. Okay. Okay. And then this arupam, or he doesn't have a material form. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have a form, it means that he doesn't have a material form, but he has a Satchitananda form, Satchitananda Vigraha. And then any part of his body can perform the function of the other parts. So this means that the Lord can walk with his hands, accept things with his legs, see with his hands, eat with his eyes. So especially eating with his eyes, we know that when we offer the food, Krishna looks at it and he eats with his eyes. He can accept and savor the food with his eyes. Okay. And this is also the aspect of his being Shukram, or omnipotent. Next, Prabhupada speaks about the Lord's form, Archa Vigraha, this deity form. We already spoke about that in the last class, but this is really important. So again, mentioning that the deity form of Krishna manifested for easy access. So quite often Krishna manifests his different incarnations to show his power or his beauty or his different opulences. But the greatest opulence of the deity is his accessibility, that he, just like the elephant sits down so the child can stroke him, so the deity appears so the devotee can approach him. There's a really beautiful deity in Jagannath Puri called Tota Gopinath. And when the pujari became very old, couldn't reach him anymore to dress him, then the deity sat down So that's like an extra accessibility. And if you go and visit Tota Gopinath temple in Puri, you give a little donation, they show you, because usually you don't see that he's sitting down because of the skirt, but they show you if you give a little donation, so you can see how Tota Gopinath sat down. Okay, and then Prabhupada also explains that foolish people who have no knowledge of Sri Isopanisad or any of the other Shruti mantras consider the Archa Vigraha, the deity, which is worshipped by pure devotees, to be made of material elements. Okay, so we know that even though the deity may be made of wood or marble and may have some of those qualities, you can't bathe a wooden deity every day, but it's still Krishna himself. And then foolish people, Kanishtadikaris, they don't understand that Krishna being omnipotent and omniscient can transform matter into spirit and spirit into matter as he desires. Okay. Next, Prabhupada speaks about those who deride Krishna, meaning due to their ignorance, they forget their relationship with the Lord, and they say that God doesn't exist, or God becomes material when he comes to the material world, like Brahman when covered by like material energy covered by Maya, that becomes Krishna. But this is ignorance. And Krishna reveals himself in proportion to surrender. As they approach me, I reciprocate accordingly. So if we approach him as Krishna, Krishna will reveal himself. If we see him as material, he will let you see him as material. If people want to think that God doesn't exist, God gives them the intelligence to make up all sorts of arguments for him not existing. Because where else would these scientists' intelligence come from, if not from God? Next, Prabhupada speaks about how the Lord maintains everyone and awards enjoyment according to our qualification. So Prabhupada makes the point that just qualification is not enough. So he gives the example, if a man wants to be a high court judge, he must acquire not just the necessary qualification, but also the consent of the authority who can award the title of high court judge. So if somebody graduates from university, it's not enough just to have the certificate, you also need to go job hunting and find someone who will employ you. So you need the consent of the authority to actually start working in that way. So in the same way, we might want things, we might even have the karma for it, but we still need the consent or we still need the super soul or Krishna to award that thing to us. So this brings up a very interesting point. There tends to be two main schools of thought. One is that everything depends on our own endeavor, and the other one is everything depends on mercy, God. So this karma vada, meaning everything depends on our karma, our own efforts, and daiva vada, meaning everything depends on mercy. But actually, we need both. So karma vada is achievement by our own efforts. Everything is in my hands. The result depends only on my efforts. If I try hard enough, I'll get it. Work hard and you can achieve everything. And then we have daiva vada, which is achievement by divine mercy. Everything is up to God or luck or fate, and our endeavors have no effect. Leave it in God's hands. God gives, God takes away. So I'm sure you heard both. But in actual fact, it's not only one or only the other, but we need both our own endeavors, our own efforts, and God's mercy. So a saying that really sums it up is trust in God and keep your gunpowder dry. Okay, so that's both karma and daiva. When we read scripture, we can find both. It's very interesting in Krishna book. At the beginning of the Govardhan Puja description, Krishna actually preaches this karmavad philosophy. And then, of course, his father refutes it, but I just read it out. This is from Krishna book. Krishna began to talk as if he were an atheist supporting the philosophy of karma mimamsa. Advocates of this philosophy do not accept the supreme authority of the personality of Godhead. They put forward the argument that if anyone works nicely, the result is sure to come. Their opinion is that even if there is a God who gives man the result of his fruitive activities, there is no need to worship him, because unless man works, he cannot bestow any result. They say that instead of worshipping a demigod or God, people should give attention to their own duties, and thus the result will surely come. Lord Krishna began to speak to his father according to these principles of the karma mimamsa philosophy. So this philosophy says that karma is above even God. Because if you don't do karma, if you don't do your work, don't do your duty, then even God can't give you the result. Okay, so this is very extreme karma. And then we have this very extreme daiva vada, which is quite often just an excuse for not doing what's right. We have examples when every time Dhritarashtra got advice from Vyasadeva or Vidura or Dronacharya saying that he should really discipline Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra could see that what Duryodhana is doing is wrong. But he just kept saying, well, what can I do? It's fate, it's providence. This is what's meant to happen. I can't interfere with this. Okay, so he used this Daivavada to kind of protect his attachment. So it's important that we understand that both are there, and both we shouldn't only rely on our own efforts, but we also shouldn't only rely on mercy, meaning we don't make any effort at all. Especially in our service, we can't just, if we go out distributing books, we can't just sit down on a bench and say, well, if Krishna wants it, people will come and buy books anyway. Ultimately, it's up to Krishna, of course, but we should also make the effort of approaching people, stopping people. Okay. Prabhupada then also speaks about Krishna being self-sufficient, or the Supreme Lord being self-sufficient, this Swayambhu, which means that the living entities have to beg for material things or liberation or anything, but the Supreme Lord is independent. He's the one who gives everybody else whatever they want. Yes. Yeah. Okay, Prabhupada speaks about it here. And then Prabhupada also speaks about Krishna being both antiseptic and prophylactic. So one it means pure and the other is purifying. So pure and purifying, meaning he purifies contamination. So when we are chanting Krishna's name, which is non-different from Krishna, then our heart becomes purified of sinful reactions, sinful desires, all the things that are obstacles in our devotional service. And when we're chanting, when we're connecting with Krishna, that also protects us from outside contamination coming in. So I'm sure we all have this experience that we may be surrounded by very kind of contaminating environments, or just something very materialistic, very material. But if we just chant in our mind, absorb our mind in Krishna, then all the contamination doesn't really affect us. Because Krishna is supremely pure, and he doesn't just purify, but he also is like a vaccination. he prevents us from getting sick or getting materially contaminated. Okay. Okay, and then Prabhupada gives the example of Krishna dancing with the gopis. Usually dancing with other people's wives, that's not particularly pure or purifying, but anything Krishna does is pure and purifying, to the extent that hearing about Krishna's pastimes with the gopis purifies lust from the heart. So how could it be a lusty material thing if it purifies lust? And of course there are deeper explanations that the gopis are all jivas, or anyway, they're all living entities who are Krishna's wives, Krishna's servants. Anyway, Krishna married all the gopis during the 1 year when Brahma stole the cowherd boys, so they were actually his wives anyway. But the point is that Krishna's pastimes, even if they apparently beyond kind of social convention, they are purifying. And Prabhupada gives the example that this relationship between the gopis and Krishna was worshipped even by Lord Chaitanya, who was a strict sannyasi, rigid follower of disciplinary regulations. Okay, and then Krishna is also compared to the sun, because the sun purifies even unclean things, but the sun itself doesn't become dirty. The sun extracts moisture from many untouchable places on earth, yet it remains pure. In fact, it purifies obnoxious things by virtue of its sterilizing power. If the sun, which is a material object, is so powerful, then we can hardly begin to imagine the purifying strength of the all-powerful Lord. Okay, this was mantra 8. Any points or questions? Okay. Now the next verse, mantra 9, starts the next section, which is about knowledge. How do we develop the spiritual vision described in the previous verses? So we need to develop the right vidya, right knowledge, and reject avidya, or the wrong kind of knowledge. So just a recap. So this is the summary of the Isopanisad. Invocation to mantra 3 was living in harmony with the Ishvara, Ishavasya. What is the Ishavasya? What are the benefits of living in harmony? What are the disadvantages of not living in harmony? Then the last few verses we read were the second section, how to know this Ishvara, and the spiritual vision, how one with this spiritual vision sees the material world, other living entities, the Supreme Lord. And then this section will start now, how to develop this spiritual vision, the right and wrong knowledge, or vidya. So vidya, we already come across this verse in Bhagavad Gita. For example, vidya vinaya sampanne brahmane gavihastine, but other places as well. So vidya means knowledge, and avidya means ignorance. So this section, mantra 9 to 11, it all speaks about vidya. In mantra 9 says that those in ignorance, avidya, go to darkness, and those in knowledge, vidya, go to even greater darkness. Mantra 10 says those in knowledge, vidya, and those in ignorance, avidya, attain different results. And the mantra 11 says only by cultivating both knowledge, vidya, and ignorance, avidya, side by side, can one transcend the material world. Now, at first glance, this is a lot. At second glance, this may look very, very contradictory. I don't know if any of you got to the second glance yet. But as we go through it, I'll explain how it all makes sense, hopefully. Okay, so let's look at the first verse of this section, mantra 9. Andam tama pravishanti ye vidyam upasate tato bhuyaiva tamo yau vidyayam rata. Shini Prabhu?
Those who engage in the culture of nascent activities shall enter into the darkest region of ignorance. Worse still are those engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge.
Thank you. So this verse says that those who engage in avidya, in ignorance, go to the darkest region, but those who engage in so-called knowledge and so-called vidya, they go to an even darker place. So just keep this in mind. And then let's say Prabhupada overview compares knowledge, ignorance, and so-called knowledge. And then Prabhupada speaks about karmis, who selfish or somewhat extended sense gratification, not following Ishavasya. Then continues talking about this sense gratification, but those who Veda Vadarata, those who use the Vedas or Vedic teachings to enjoy, and Maya Apakrita Jnana, those again who use Vedic teachings to think that they are God, which is the kind of, you could say, the ultimate level of sense gratification. And speaks about this. Veda Vadarata Prabhupada explains a little bit more about them, that they're ignorant of the actual purpose of the Vedas, and they think that the heavenly planets are the ultimate goal. Then, because we can see what happens by misunderstanding the Vedas, this Veda Vadarata Maya Apakrita Jnana, that the conclusion is we need a spiritual master to understand the Vedas properly. Otherwise we misunderstand and we become this Veda Vadarata or Maya Apakrita Jnana. And then Prabhupada at last speaks about Maya Apakrita Jnana. Who remembers where we had Maya Apakrita Jnana before?
Is it in the 4 kinds of people who don't take to the service of the Lord?
Yeah, yes, I think it's in chapter 7. Those whose knowledge is stolen by illusion. So they think they are God or no need to worship God. Anyway, so they're a little bit misguided. So this is the overview of the purport. Okay, so let's look at, so in Prabhupada's purport, he explains that knowledge means knowing and acting according to Ishavasya, basically knowing what is Ishavasya and acting accordingly. So that's knowledge, that's Vidya. Ignorance is not knowing Ishavasya and obviously not acting according to it, so acting in ignorance. And then we have so-called knowledge, when we don't know Ishavasya, but we pretend to have knowledge. So one thing is when you are ignorant, then you can kind of learn. But when you think you have knowledge and you have the wrong kind of knowledge, then it's very difficult to learn because you think you already know. So Prabhupada in this purport also gives a definition of Ishavasya. He says, as stated in Mantra 1, we should know that the personality of Godhead is the proprietor of everything and that we must be satisfied with our allotted portions of the necessities of life. So again, defines Ishavasya. Okay. Prabhupada speaks about education, modern education. It's very interesting what he says. He says, modern civilization has advanced considerably in the field of mass education, but the result is that people are more unhappy than ever before because of the stress placed on material advancement to the exclusion of the most important part of life, the spiritual aspect. So Prabhupada gives credit where credit is due. There is great advancement in mass education, but because the whole purpose of education is misguided, then education doesn't actually give happiness, but it creates more and more anxiety and distress. The school where I work, and any school in fact, it's probably the school where I work is probably one of the better ones, but every school has so many people who work there who are not actually teaching, but they're looking after the mental health of the students, because there's so much trouble, so much difficulty, even at a young age, because the whole civilization is misguided. And Chaitanya Charan Prabhu has this, we have guided messiahs but misguided minds. So we are very expert in technological advancement and thinking about how to enjoy, but our whole life is misguided, so it doesn't actually give joy, happiness. We said that people are educated to think that sense gratification is the goal of life, but we all have this Krishna-shaped vacuum in our heart, and no amount of sense gratification and cars and houses and girlfriends or boyfriends will ever fill that Krishna-shaped hole. So that's why there's so much anxiety, and people become more and more desperate. They try more and more desperate things to try to enjoy, to try to fill that hole. Prabhupada says that modern civilization is a patchwork of activities meant to cover the perpetual miseries of material existence. I like this statement so much that I made up a slide meditating on the patchwork of activities meant to cover the perpetual miseries. So money, donuts, alcohol, medicines, gambling, activism for different causes in the world, love, Facebook, Netflix. And I'm sure that since then, I did these slides about 10 years ago, since then a lot more. But the basic principle is the same, that we have all this patchwork, trying to throw together things that somehow fill in the hole, but it doesn't fill it, because it's Krishna that we are missing. So even though education is much advanced, but because the education is promoting the wrong kind of knowledge, the knowledge that sense gratification is the goal of life, then it leads to greater darkness. So it's bad to be in ignorance. To be in ignorance and claim to be in knowledge is worse, because it's misleading yourself and others. And then to be in ignorance, claim to be in knowledge, and condemn real knowledge as ignorance, that's the worst. Because that even takes other people away from God, taking away their chance of real guidance. Is this okay so far? Any thoughts or points relating to this, Narada?
This to be in ignorance and claim to be in knowledge, there's an intention, no? There, like you say earlier, the so-called knowledge is pretending, but there is a difference, no, between this and say you are misguided and you think you know because you've been given knowledge that is not knowledge. So, but if you're misguided, it's different to have the wrong thing and pretend, no? There is a difference, or no, or you will put all together in. Am I making any sense in a?
I'm not sure I understand you. I tell you what the difference here is, like, being in ignorance is maybe what you mean by being misguided or not having the right knowledge. That's fairly innocent. Being in ignorance and claiming to be knowledge means that innocence is not there so much. There is some level of pride, thinking I already know. So it's very difficult to get actual knowledge. And then the third one is not just you claim to know, even though you are in ignorance, but you actively misguiding others. So that those are the kind of various levels of ignorance.
So if you've been misled, but don't know that you're pretending, that will be the first one, just being ignorant.
Fairly innocent, yeah.
So the innocence is lost once you're pretending, or
yeah,
okay.
And we don't have time to go into this in too much detail, but I put up the slides and then you can think about it or maybe discuss it with your friends. We have Stephen Hawking's final book, which is entitled There is No God or Afterlife. Okay? So this part is, in a brief history of time, Professor Stephen Hawking was equivocal about the possibility of creator, stating that finding a complete theory of the universe would allow mankind to know the mind of God. Okay, but now in his final book, he says that there's actually no God, no afterlife, no heaven. So first he said, oh, maybe there is a God, so we can know the mind of God, which is already very presumptuous, very arrogant. How can you know the mind of God? But here he says there is no God at all. And so that's one part. But then it's very interesting to read it along this second part. You can read that. That's Hawking's daughter, Lucy, who attended the book launch of this book about There is No God, said hearing her father's unmistakable voice had been very emotional. I turned away because I had tears forming in my eyes, she said. I feel sometimes like he's still here because we talk about him, we hear his voice, and we see images of him. So even for the daughter of Stephen Hawking, it's actually inconceivable that somebody who existed ceases to exist, because the soul is eternal, and we all know that, like, instinctively. But anyway, I let you kind of contemplate these two little articles side by side. There's a lot in it relating to the topics we speak about, being in ignorance, pretending to be in knowledge, and then misguiding others also. Okay. Next, we'll speak a little bit about these karmis, Vedavadaratas, and Mayavadis, and the need for spiritual master. So, as we kind of learned from Bhagavad Gita, karmis, it includes selfish and extended sense gratification. So selfish would be, I want to enjoy, and extended, I'm working for my family, I'm working for my community, my society, humanity, the kangaroos in Australia. So something that's not me personally, but to some extent working for others as well. But if there is no purpose other than sense gratification, whether it's selfish or extended, then that's demoniac. Because remember this verse from 16th chapter, Asatyam apratishtam te jagadahuranishwaram aparasparasam bhutam kim kamam aitukam. I don't remember the last lines. So there is the world is unreal, no foundation, no God in control. It's produced of sex desire and has no cause other than lust. Meaning the whole world is about lust, whether lust as in sexual desire or just lust for enjoyment. But it's all about enjoying. And then instead of worshipping God, then people worship celebrities or musicians, actors. They suddenly become really important and amazing people that everybody listens to them. I find it quite amazing that when some footballer makes a statement about a politician or some political event, then everybody listens to them as if they were an expert on politics or economics or whatever else. It's like they may be a very good footballer, but it's a different thing. But this whole celebrity culture, we create our own gods. So because we turned away from the real God, then we create other worshipable personalities, because there is a need in everyone's heart to worship God. And even in very communist countries, in North Korea, for example, when people get married, then each couple gets as a wedding present a picture of Kim Jong-un and Kim Il-sung all these founders of North Korea, and they worship it in their house. Every so often, the officials go into everyone's house and make sure there is no dust on the pictures. And if the house is burning, the first thing you have to save is, the pictures of Kim Jong-un. So it's like a deity worship kind of thing, because everybody needs that worshipping something or someone. It's in our heart. Okay, but we kind of went through this many times. What happens when we make sense gratification our God? It doesn't give happiness; it gives shoka, anxiety, lamentation, and anxiety. So one thing is important to understand, that we're talking about Stephen Hawking here, but science or technology in itself is not bad. So it's very good that doctors can do open heart surgery now, and a lot of technological. We couldn't be having this Bhakti Shastri class unless there were computers and Zoom and phones. So technology, science in itself is not good or bad. It's how we use it that makes it good or bad. So just remember that. Okay, so these were the karmis who make sense gratification the ultimate purpose or ultimate goal of life. And then we have Veda Vadarata, who are karmis, but karmis who base their idea of sense gratification on the Vedas. So the Vedas do speak about enjoying your senses as one of the aspects of human life, and do help people in that sense. But the purpose is that by helping people in that, then people's faith in the Vedas will increase and start going a little deeper in the Vedas and understand that the higher purposes of life. So thinking that religion is to satisfy my senses is the wrong kind of understanding of religion. But for some people, this may be a first step. Remember, we spoke about karma candies. At least they accept that there is religion. At least they accept that there is God. So that's a good first step, but don't get stuck on that level. So these Veda Vadaratas are those who get stuck on this level, thinking that religion is just for sense gratification, to give me sense enjoyment. But it's not a bad thing if one can progress from there, but if one gets stuck, then the good becomes the enemy of the best. An example again from Krishna book is the yogic brahmanas, who were so absorbed in doing their yagyas that when the goal of all yagyas came to them, Krishna, then they didn't recognize him and they sent him away. Okay. And this brings the next point that Prabhupada speaks about in the purport, the need for a spiritual master in understanding the Vedas. Because this Veda Vadarata, Maya Pakrita Jnana, those whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, they all read the Vedas, but they become diverted from the purpose of the Vedas. That's why we need a spiritual master. And the great acharyas. And by following the teachings of the great acharyas, then we can understand properly. Prabhupada explains how to approach these great acharyas or spiritual masters. Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshantite jnanam jnananas tattvadarshana. So the three principles, if I can find it, yeah. So humility, inquiry, pariprashnena, and sevaya. So pranipatena means humility, pariprashnena, inquiry, and sevaya means service. So we need these three principles in approaching a spiritual master, in approaching the great acharya, so we can get the proper understanding of the Vedas. Okay, and then finally, Prabhupada speaks about Maya Pakrita Jnana, these self-made gods. So they think that they are God, there is no need for worshipping any other God. in some ways the psychology is the same as the sense enjoyers, because both want to enjoy. It's just there's Maya, Apakrita, Jnana, they have some high philosophy to go with it, but they also just want to be God, so they are the best, they are the greatest, they are the supreme controller, supreme enjoyer, supreme proprietor. But their knowledge is actually stolen by Maya, because they think that they're God, but they're not. In relation to this, I wanted to mention the two kinds of impersonalists who Prabhupada speaks about, not so much in detail in this purport, but in general it's good to have an understanding. Not here. Yeah. So Brahmavadis, they're impersonalists. They're more attracted to the impersonal feature than to a personal feature, but they're not offensive. They either don't know about Bhagavan, Krishna, or they're not attracted to him. They're more attracted to the Brahman, to the energy. But they're not offenders, and if they meet devotees, they can become devotees as well. An example of them is the Kumaras. Originally they were impersonalists, but when they smelled the tulsi leaves from Krishna's feet, Narayan's feet, then they became devotees. So they can make spiritual advancement, but it's very difficult. In chapter 12 in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that because there is nothing positive to be attached to, it's just trying to be detached from the material world. It's very difficult to advance in that discipline. And then we have Mayavadis, who are actually offensive. They say that Krishna's form is Maya, Krishna's pastimes are Maya, and the formless Brahman is the highest. Krishna is temporary. If Maya covers Brahman, then it becomes Krishna. So it's a very dangerous and very offensive misunderstanding of the Vedas. Okay, so they're both impersonalists, and usually Prabhupada speaks about Mayavadis when he kind of speaks about impersonalists, but both are there, and it's important to understand and distinguish between them. Okay. And then it's not just knowing the philosophy, but like I mentioned with the previous verse, we can also be a little introspective and think about how it applies to me. Do I have any Mayavadi tendencies or impersonalist tendencies in my heart? How can I overcome them? Okay, so this is for everyone, for their own contemplation. Okay, this was mantra 9. Any thoughts, points, questions?
Hare Krishna. I was just wondering, when are we gonna have an exam? Because I'm conscious we're going quite fast, so I just want to plan.
Okay, so my kind of thoughts are that maybe we have another 4, maybe 5 classes.
Okay.
But we'll see.
Thank you.
We'll see. But I put up the questions, right? The Purva Swadhyaya and the verses.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
They're huge. So many.
Yeah, it's a very interesting book, this Sri Isopanisad. There's a lot in it. Okay. Let's read the next verse. We got a little bit of time. Anya devahur vidyaya, anya dahur avidyaya, iti shushrumadhiranam yenastad vichachakshire. Brajadevi?
Hare Krishna. The wise have explained that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge and that a different result is obtained from the culture of nescience.
Okay, so this is where, thank you, this is where we're going to go into the apparent contradictions. So if you are getting a little tired from listening to me for the last almost hour and a half, then maybe stand up, jump up and down a little, but make sure you are kind of awake for this because this is quite important. And since Shyamala Kumari brought it up, this might come up in the exam as well. Okay, so I hope everyone's awake now. So when I kind of started this section, I kind of said that this might sound a bit contradictory. We had mantra 9, which says, those in ignorance and those in knowledge, those in ignorance go to darkness, those in knowledge go to even greater darkness. Then this mantra says, those in knowledge and those in ignorance go to completely different places, different directions. It seems to contradict the first one. And then the third mantra says, you need to cultivate both knowledge and ignorance to transcend the material world, which seems to contradict both previous mantras. Okay, so to reconcile all these contradictions, we need to understand what's meant by vidya and avidya in the various mantras. And this is another reason why we need to follow the acharyas, the spiritual master, when reading scripture, when reading the Vedas. Otherwise, we'll get very confused and it's very easy to come to the wrong conclusion. So in mantra 9, vidya or knowledge means knowledge for pursuing sense gratification. So this is what Prabhupada says, mass education is very advanced. So people are learning a lot, but they're learning how to pursue sense gratification. And that creates a lot of trouble. But so for them, knowledge is how to enjoy. And then avidya, in the same verse, is ignorant pursuit of sense gratification. So ignorant would be like those are a little innocent, like we were talking with Narada. They're misguided, but they're fairly innocent. And those with the vidya, they think they know. So it's much harder for them to know. And that's why the verse says that those in ignorance go to darkness and those in knowledge go to even greater darkness because they have the wrong kind of knowledge. So this was mantra 9. In mantra 10, vidya means something different. In mantra 10, vidya means knowledge for pursuing Krishna consciousness. So this is what we usually call knowledge. Knowledge for Krishna consciousness. And avidya, or ignorance, means both knowledge and ignorance from mantra 9. Okay, and that's why they go to different places. So those who have knowledge for Krishna consciousness, they go back to Krishna, and those who are ignorant, have either ignorant or knowledgeable sense gratification, they go to a different place. So vidya and avidya mean different things here. And then in mantra 11, we'll see that vidya, it still means knowledge for Krishna consciousness, and avidya, ignorance, means knowledge for bodily maintenance. So material knowledge that you use so you have a somewhat stable life, so you can pursue Krishna consciousness. And that's why it says you need both. Okay, so as we are reading the verses, try to keep this in mind and then understand it with this in mind. Okay, and then the purport overview. Prabhupada starts by the 18 items of knowledge, actually from chapter 13. Some of you might remember from your diligent study for the exam. There were 20 items of knowledge in verses 5 to 12, I think, in chapter 13. Prabhupada summarizes them as 18 items of knowledge. So culturing this is real knowledge. And then advancement of material knowledge is actually avidya, ignorance, and it binds one. And then Prabhupada again speaks about how to discriminate between knowledge and illusion. We need the spiritual master, we need a dhira, or somebody who's sober, undisturbed. We need their guidance. Okay. Okay, so we won't go through all the 18 items of knowledge, especially since we discussed them in quite some detail when we studied Bhagavad Gita. But you can read them, if you want, you can also compare them to the Bhagavad Gita translations. But I just looked at the first two, Amanitvam and Adambitvam. So Amanitvam is humility, Adambitvam is pridelessness. So Amanitvam, in the Isopanisad, Prabhupada explains, one should become a perfect gentleman and learn to give proper respect to others. And in the Bhagavad Gita, the same quality, Prabhupada explains, humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. Okay, so you can think about how the two are related. And the way Chaitanya Charan Prabhu explains is that one has good qualities but not anxious to be respected. Okay, so this is Amanitvam. And then Adambitvam, Damba means pride. So Adambitvam means being free from pride. In Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada translates as humility, pridelessness. So although they may be synonyms to some extent, they're not the exact same thing. So Adambitvam, pridelessness, means being free from pride, having no good qualities and still demanding respect. That would be pride. In Isopanisad, Prabhupada says, one should not pose himself as a religionist simply for name and fame. So using religion for the enjoyment of name and fame. And then in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada says, people are very anxious to be famous for their religion, and consequently sometimes it's found that without understanding the principles of religion, one enters into some group which is not actually following religious principles and then wants to advertise himself as a religious mentor. So using religion for honor and prestige. Also, Prabhupada mentions about Acharya Upasanam, worshipping the spiritual master. We mentioned that in relation to the last verse. So humility, inquiry, service, those are the principles. And then you can read through all the other qualities as well. It's very interesting. The last, the 18th quality, one should become a scientist or a philosopher and conduct research into spiritual knowledge, recognizing that spiritual knowledge is permanent, whereas material knowledge ends with the death of the body. So usually philosopher and scientist, they are considered very different things. And the scientists are one, who do all the measurements and experiments and laboratory. Prabhupada here says we should become scientists and conduct research, but not into the kind of how solutions work in chemistry or chemical bonding, but into spiritual knowledge. That's real research, real knowledge. So spiritual knowledge is permanent, material knowledge ends with the body. Science and philosophy used to be quite closely related. So in the classical world, ancient Romans, ancient Greeks, they used to be both scientists and philosophers. We have Pythagoras, I don't know if any of you remember from maths class, but he wasn't just a mathematician, he was also a philosopher. Because at the time, the two were considered quite closely related, and both were used in search for the absolute truth, search for God. In relation to this, I got something quite interesting. how knowledge was perceived in different ways through the ages. So Prahlad Maharaj in the Srimad Bhagavatam, he says, knowledge is devotion. This is the transcendental vision of knowledge. And this is also in Bhagavad Gita, all these different qualities that are actually character development, so one can be a good devotee. Then Socrates, in the 1400s before Christ, so maybe 2,500 years ago, for him knowledge is virtue, which you could say mode of goodness. Then Francis Bacon, about 500 years ago, he says knowledge is power, which is mode of passion. I'm sure now that you all studied the three modes, you can see how it's related. And then we also have useless knowledge, like people go for these pop quizzes where you have to know who won the World Cup in 1962 or whatever. And also knowledge for destruction, like how to create a nuclear bomb. So these are knowledge. This is knowledge in ignorance, which is a contradiction, but I'm sure you understand. So real knowledge is development of character for devotion, not amassing facts. This is something to think about when we think about knowledge. It's not just facts, but there is a purpose. There's a higher purpose to knowledge. Okay, I think we can. Actually, I just show you this. You can read this in your own time. This is from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of his bhajans. It's called Vidyara Vilasi, and it says how he was gathering more and more knowledge, but he understood that this material knowledge is actually just pure ignorance. And indulgence in mundane knowledge verily makes an ass of the eternal soul by encouraging his infatuation with this temporary world. So you can read this bhajan. It's very, very nice in the sense to see the exemplary humility of the great Acharya. Prabhupada just mentions it in the purport. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, a great Acharya, maintained that all forms of material knowledge are just external features of the illusory energy, and culturing them one becomes no better than an ass. So this is the origin where Prabhupada was it from. Okay, so we can stop here. For homework, I'd like you to go back a little. Not this one. Actually, we can do this one. You can choose, okay? There are three choices. So one choice is choose one verse in this section, mantra 4 to 8, about which you feel you have some realization. Explore and discuss your insights and realizations. So this, remember, this is seeing Krishna everywhere, seeing all living entities as spiritual sparks. Or choose one verse from this section which, if applied, would enhance your own Krishna consciousness, and write a plan for doing this. So these are two choices, and I give you a third one as well. You only need to do one of them. And then the third choice is reconcile the following: being careful to play the part designated for us by the Lord, and at the same time utilizing our own initiative. Okay? And then with reference to Prabhupada's statements in Mantra 7. Of course, you can quote from other places as well. You can also consider this in this homework. What is proper initiative for the part and parcel of living entity? Okay, I put up all three choices so you can think about it, and then you can choose which one you want to do. Charanarine, you seem to have put your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. It's just the name of the bhajan, but it came back up on the screen, so
yeah, it's Vidyara Vilasi, it's called. You can look it up as well if you want. Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much for your kind attention. It's really nice seeing you after 2 weeks. And then hope to see you again next Wednesday.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Ki Jai Shri Isopanisad.
Thank you.
Hey Jai.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Bol.
Krishna.
Hare Bol. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Haribol.